The icy river water filled her lungs as the current dragged her downstream, her wedding dress billowing around her like a shroud. Lucinda Morgan's final thoughts before darkness claimed her were not of her family or the life she was leaving behind, but of the cruel irony that she would die in her wedding gown without ever having been a wife. The year was 1875, and the untamed territory of Wyoming was as beautiful as it was dangerous. Lucinda had come west with dreams of a new life, only to find herself betrayed by the very man who had promised to protect her. Now, as the rushing waters of the Snake River carried her limp body downstream, those dreams seemed destined to die with her. Isaac Vance stood on the riverbank, his horse drinking lazily from the calmer shallows, when he spotted something white cutting through the current. At first he thought it might be a piece of driftwood, perhaps even a fallen tree branch with its pale underside exposed. But as the object drifted closer, Isaac's heart leaped into his throat. It wasn't driftwood, it was a woman. Without hesitation, he plunged into the frigid water. The current was strong, threatening to pull him under with each step, but Isaac was stronger. Years of breaking horses and working cattle had given him the strength and determination needed to battle the river's pull. When he finally reached the woman, her face was pale, lips blue, the elaborate white dress she wore tangled around her legs like a net. Isaac wrapped one strong arm around her waist and used the other to fight the current, kicking with all his might toward the shore. By the time he dragged her onto the muddy riverbank, his lungs were burning and his muscles screamed in protest. He turned her onto her side, pushing against her back until water spilled from her mouth. For one terrible moment, he thought he was too late. Then she coughed, a violent, wrenching sound, and drew in a ragged breath. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of spring violets, dazed and unfocused. Her skin was like porcelain, marred only by a nasty bruise forming along her left cheekbone. Her dark hair, which had come loose from its pins, clung to her face and neck in wet ropes. "You're all right now," Isaac said, his voice gentle as he brushed wet strands of hair from her face. "I've got you." She tried to speak, but could only manage another cough, water still draining from her lungs. "Don't try to talk yet," he soothed, wrapping his duster around her shivering form. "I'll keep you safe now." Her eyes widened slightly at his words before they rolled back, and she slipped into unconsciousness once more. Isaac lifted her into his arms, marveling at how light she felt despite the waterlogged dress that hung from her frame. His horse, Thunderbolt, stood nearby, eyeing the situation with what Isaac swore was curiosity. "Got ourselves a bit of trouble here, boy," Isaac murmured as he carefully placed the unconscious woman on the saddle before mounting behind her. With one arm secure around her waist, he nudged Thunderbolt into motion, heading for his cabin in the foothills. The ride back was slow and careful. Every few minutes, Isaac would check to make sure the woman was still breathing, her chest rising and falling beneath the soaked fabric of her wedding dress. A bride. She was a bride, or at least she had been meant to be one. The thought raised more questions than answers, but those would have to wait. His cabin came into view as the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. It wasn't much a simple one-room structure with a lean-to for Thunderbolt, but it was sturdy and warm. Right now, warmth was what the woman needed most. Inside, Isaac worked quickly. He laid her on his bed, then built up the fire until flames leaped high in the stone hearth. The woman hadn't stirred since their ride began, but her breathing seemed stronger now, more even. Isaac faced a dilemma. The wedding dress was soaked through, and she would develop a dangerous chill if she remained in the wet garment. Yet he was a gentleman, and the thought of undressing an unconscious woman went against everything he believed in. He settled for a compromise. Carefully, he removed her shoes and the outer layer of her dress, leaving her in the silk chemise beneath. He covered her with every blanket he owned, then set about brewing a strong pot of coffee. The rich aroma soon filled the small cabin, mingling with the scent of wood smoke. It was nearly midnight when she finally stirred. Isaac had been dozing in a chair by the fire, but he was instantly alert when he heard her soft moan. "Where am I?" Her voice was raw, barely above a whisper. Isaac moved to the bedside, keeping a respectful distance. My cabin, madam. I pulled you from the river about 10 miles back. She tried to sit up but winced, falling back against the pillow. The river, she repeated, as if testing the words. Then her eyes widened with remembrance and her hand flew to her bruised cheek. Oh God, you're safe now, Isaac assured her. I'm Isaac Vance. I have a small spread in these parts. She regarded him with wary eyes, taking in his tall frame, the weathered face beneath a shock of dark hair, the kind blue eyes that watched her with concern. Lucinda Morgan, she finally offered, though I suppose I'm not a Morgan anymore. I never became a Wright either. Isaac poured a cup of coffee and offered it to her, helping her to sit up enough to drink. Wright, would that be Howard Wright's son? Lucinda's hands trembled as she took the cup. Gerald Wright, do you know him? Isaac's expression darkened. I know of him. His father owns the largest ranch in the territory. The Wrights aren't known for their kind treatment of those they consider beneath them. No, Lucinda agreed, her voice hollow. They're not. Isaac wanted to ask what had happened, how she'd ended up in the river in her wedding dress, but the haunted look in her eyes stopped him. You don't have to tell me anything, Miss Morgan, but you're welcome to stay here until you're well enough to travel. Travel where? The bitterness in her voice was palpable. I have nowhere to go. My family is back east. I came here to marry Gerald because my father arranged it, he thought. She trailed off, tears welling in her eyes. He thought it would be a good match. The daughter of a Boston merchant and the son of a cattle baron. Isaac remained silent, allowing her the space to continue if she wished. When I arrived last week, Gerald seemed charming enough. But then I overheard him talking to his father the night before the wedding. They only wanted my father's shipping connections to expand their business. And Gerald, he already had a woman he preferred, someone more suited to frontier life, as he put it. Lucinda's knuckles whitened around the coffee cup. When I confronted him, he became angry. Said I would marry him anyway, that the arrangements were final. And the river, Isaac prompted gently when she fell silent. Lucinda closed her eyes. We were crossing the bridge to the church. I told him I wouldn't go through with it. He struck me. Her hand drifted to her bruised cheek. When I tried to run, he grabbed my dress. We struggled and I fell, or perhaps he pushed me. I don't remember clearly, just the cold water and then nothing until I woke here. Isaac's jaw tightened with anger. The Wrights were powerful, but what Gerald had done was beyond the pale. He'll pay for this, Isaac said, his voice low and dangerous. No, Lucinda's eyes flew open. Please, Mr. Vance, I just want to forget it happened. The Wrights are too powerful to challenge. Isaac, he corrected gently. And no man is above justice, Miss Morgan. Lucinda, she replied. And in my experience, wealth often places men precisely above justice. Isaac couldn't argue with that. He'd seen enough in his 30 years to know that money could indeed buy immunity from consequences. For now, you need rest, he conceded. We can figure out the rest tomorrow. Lucinda nodded, her eyelids already growing heavy. Thank you for saving me, she murmured as sleep began to reclaim her. You said something when you pulled me from the river. What was it? Isaac smiled softly. I said I'd keep you, and I meant it. You're safe here, Lucinda. She drifted off to sleep with those words echoing in her mind, offering the first comfort she'd known since arriving in this wild territory. The next few days passed in a haze of recovery for Lucinda. Her body was battered from the river, bruises blooming across her pale skin like watercolors on canvas. Isaac proved to be a surprisingly attentive caretaker, brewing willow bark tea for her pain and ensuring she ate properly to regain her strength. On the third morning, Lucinda awoke to find a bundle of clothing beside the bed. I rode to town yesterday while you were sleeping, Isaac explained when he noticed her examining the simple calico dress and sturdy boots. Figured you might want something other than a wedding dress to wear. Lucinda fingered the practical fabric. It was nothing like the fine silks and satins she was accustomed to, but it represented something important, a new beginning. Thank you. This is very thoughtful. When Isaac stepped outside to give her privacy to change, Lucinda rose carefully from the bed. Her body still ached, but the sharp pain had subsided to a dull throb. The dress fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the waist. She found a piece of ribbon among the items Isaac had purchased and used it to cinch the garment. Isaac's eyes widened appreciatively when she emerged from the cabin. The simple dress suited her far better than he would have imagined. With her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and her cheeks beginning to regain their color, she looked less like a Boston society lady and more like a woman who belonged in the West. "It fits," she said, smoothing the fabric self-consciously. "It suits you," Isaac replied honestly. Lucinda looked around the small clearing where Isaac's cabin stood. A corral held 3 horses, Thunderbolt, and 2 others, while chickens pecked at the ground nearby. A small garden was beginning to sprout early vegetables, and beyond it all, the majestic mountains rose toward a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at it. "What will you do now?" Isaac asked, watching her take in her surroundings. Lucinda sighed. "I don't know. I can't return to Boston. My father would only send me back to fulfill the contract he made with Howard Wright. I have some education. I could perhaps find work as a teacher." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "Medicine Bow could use a teacher. It's a small town about 2 days' ride from here, but—" He hesitated, then continued, "The Wrights have influence there too." "Is there anywhere they don't?" Lucinda asked bitterly. "Not in this territory," Isaac admitted, "but you're welcome to stay here as long as you need to figure things out." "I don't have much, but what I have, I'm willing to share." Lucinda studied him, trying to understand his motivations. Men, in her experience, always wanted something in return for their kindness. Why would you do that for a stranger? Isaac shrugged, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe I'm just tired of talking to horses and chickens." Despite herself, Lucinda laughed a genuine sound that surprised them both. "Well, I certainly hope I'm better company than a chicken." "Much better," Isaac assured her with a grin. "Though Henrietta over there might take offense." As the days turned into weeks, Lucinda found herself settling into life at Isaac's small ranch. Her body healed, and with it, some of the wounds to her spirit began to mend as well. Isaac taught her practical skills she'd never needed in Boston: how to gather eggs without upsetting the hens, how to tend the garden, even how to shoot the rifle he kept over the door. In return, Lucinda brought order to Isaac's bachelor existence. She organized his meager supplies, mended his clothing, and improved his simple meals with herbs from the garden. In the evenings, she would read aloud from one of the few books he owned, mostly practical guides to ranching, and a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets that had belonged to his mother. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a simple supper, Lucinda asked the question that had been on her mind since her arrival. "How did you come to be alone out here, Isaac? You're a kind man, capable. I would have thought you'd have a family of your own by now." Isaac was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. "I had a wife once," he finally said, his voice soft with remembrance. "Eleanor. We came west together 6 years ago, full of dreams about building something that would be ours." Lucinda felt a pang of jealousy at the tenderness in his voice when he spoke of his wife, which immediately gave way to shame. What happened to her? Fever took her the second winter. It swept through the territory, took a lot of good people. Isaac's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "After that, I couldn't bear to be around others much. Bought this piece of land because it was far from town, far from memories." "I'm sorry," Lucinda said, and meant it. She'd seen enough of Isaac now to know he would have been a devoted husband. Isaac nodded his acknowledgement of her sympathy. "What about you? Was Wright your first intended?" "My only intended," Lucinda corrected. "My father was determined I should make an advantageous match. There were suitors in Boston, but none with the financial prospects of Gerald Wright. When Howard Wright approached my father about a match that would benefit both families' businesses, it was decided without much input from me." "That doesn't seem right," Isaac said with a frown. "Marriage should be about more than business." Lucinda gave him a sad smile. "Perhaps for some. But for many in my circle, marriage has always been a matter of contracts and advantages. Love is considered a pleasant bonus if it happens to develop, but hardly a requirement." "And what do you believe?" Isaac asked, his blue eyes intent on her face. Lucinda looked away, suddenly flustered by his direct gaze. "I used to think I could be content with a marriage of convenience. Now—" She trailed off, then continued more firmly, "Now I think I would rather be alone than tied to someone who sees me as nothing more than a business asset." Isaac nodded slowly. Well, you won't have to worry about that here. Out in these parts, a person is judged by their character and their willingness to work hard. Everything else is just window dressing. As spring blossomed into early summer, Lucinda found herself falling into a comfortable routine with Isaac. They worked side by side during the day, and in the evenings, they would talk about everything and nothing. Isaac had given up his bed for her, insisting on sleeping on a pallet near the fire, always the gentleman despite their increasingly familiar companionship. One morning, Isaac announced he needed to ride into town for supplies. "I've been putting it off, but we're running low on flour and coffee," he explained as he saddled Thunderbolt. "Will you be all right here alone? I should be back by nightfall." Lucinda assured him she would be fine. After he departed, she set about her chores with the confidence of someone who had learned to be self-sufficient. She was hanging laundry on the line when she heard the sound of approaching horses. 3 riders emerged from the tree line, and Lucinda's blood ran cold. In the lead was Gerald Wright, his handsome face set in hard lines. Flanking him were 2 men she recognized as ranch hands from the Wright property. Gerald dismounted, his eyes narrowing as he took in her simple dress and the domestic scene. "So this is where you've been hiding," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "Playing house with that saddle tramp Vance." Lucinda straightened her spine, refusing to show fear despite the rapid beating of her heart. "What do you want, Gerald?" "What's rightfully mine," he replied, advancing toward her. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Your little stunt at the bridge embarrassed my family in front of half the territory. My father's business deal with your father is in jeopardy." "I nearly died," Lucinda said, her voice shaking with anger. "You struck me and either pushed me or let me fall into the river. I could have drowned." Gerald waved a dismissive hand. "Yet here you are, alive and well, and coming back with me. Your father has already been notified that you survived your accident, and he's quite insistent that our arrangement proceed." Lucinda backed away as Gerald approached. "I won't go with you. I'm not your property." Gerald's smile was cold. "Actually, according to the contract your father and mine signed, you are. And if you won't come willingly, I'm authorized to use whatever means necessary to bring you back." Lucinda's mind raced. The cabin was too far away for her to reach the rifle. The horses were in the corral behind the house, out of reach. She was trapped. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Wright." Isaac's voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. He sat atop Thunderbolt at the edge of the clearing, his rifle trained steadily on Gerald's chest. Gerald's hand instinctively moved toward his pistol. "I wouldn't do that either," Isaac warned, his voice dangerously calm. "I'm a fair shot at this distance." The 2 ranch hands exchanged nervous glances, clearly unsure if they were being paid enough to die for Gerald Wright's pride. "This doesn't concern you, Vance," Gerald snapped. "The woman is my betrothed." "The woman has a name," Isaac replied, dismounting but keeping his rifle ready. "And Lucinda has made it clear she doesn't wish to go with you." Gerald's face flushed with anger. "My father will hear about this." "You can't hide her forever." "I'm not hiding," Lucinda said, finding her courage in Isaac's presence. "I'm choosing to stay where I'm respected and safe." Gerald looked from Lucinda to Isaac, calculating his odds. Finally, he gave a curt nod to his men. "This isn't over," he promised as he mounted his horse. "A contract is a contract. Your father will see to it that you honor your obligations, Lucinda." After the 3 riders disappeared into the trees, Lucinda's legs gave way beneath her. She sank to the ground, her hands trembling. Isaac was at her side in an instant, his rifle set aside as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" Lucinda shook her head. "I'm just shaken. But he's right, Isaac. This isn't over. If my father knows I'm alive, he'll insist I fulfill the contract." Isaac helped her to her feet, his expression grim. "Then we'll have to find a way to break that contract. I won't let them force you into a marriage with that snake." That night, as they sat at the table discussing their options, a summer storm rolled in from the mountains. Rain lashed against the cabin's windows and thunder rumbled overhead. "You could leave the territory," Isaac suggested. "Go further west to California or Oregon." Lucinda shook her head. "I have no money of my own." My father controls my inheritance, and I doubt I could get far before Gerald's men found me. Isaac ran a hand through his hair in frustration. What about your mother? Would she help you? She died when I was 15, Lucinda replied softly. It's been just my father and me since then. He's not a bad man, really. He truly believes he's doing what's best for me by securing my future with a wealthy husband. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cabin in stark white light, followed by a crash of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations. Lucinda jumped at the sound, and Isaac instinctively reached across the table to take her hand. I meant what I said that day by the river, he said, his voice low and intense. I'll keep you safe, Lucinda. I won't let them take you against your will. The warmth of his hand around hers sent a flutter through Lucinda's chest. In the weeks they had spent together, something had changed between them, a slow-building tension that neither had acknowledged until now. Why do you care so much what happens to me? Lucinda asked, not pulling her hand away. Isaac's eyes held hers in the flickering lamplight. Because in the time you've been here, you've brought life back to this place, back to me. I was existing before, not living. And I can't bear the thought of you being forced into a life that would break your spirit. Lucinda felt tears stinging her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her with such sincerity, such genuine concern for her happiness rather than her usefulness. There might be one way, Isaac said slowly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. If you were already married to someone else, the contract with Wright would be void. Lucinda's breath caught in her throat. Are you suggesting? A marriage of convenience, Isaac clarified quickly, though the intensity in his eyes suggested it might be more than that for him. On paper only. It would protect you legally from Wright's claim. Once the danger has passed, we could seek an annulment if you wished. Lucinda considered his offer. A marriage to Isaac would indeed solve her immediate problem. And if she were honest with herself, the thought of being his wife, even in name only, was not unpleasant. Quite the opposite, in fact. It wouldn't be fair to you, she said finally. You deserve a real marriage, not a legal arrangement to help a woman in trouble. Isaac's grip on her hand tightened slightly. Lucinda, look at me. I live alone in a one-room cabin miles from town. I'm not exactly fighting off potential brides, and I. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I've grown fond of having you here, more than fond. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the cabin, a different kind of tension built. If we did this, Lucinda said carefully, it wouldn't just be for show to me, Isaac. I've come to care for you too, more than I thought possible after everything that happened. Isaac's eyes widened slightly at her confession. Are you saying you'd want a real marriage? Not just a legal protection, Lucinda nodded, her cheeks flushing. I've never met a man like you, honest, kind, respectful, the kind of man who would risk everything to protect a woman he barely knew. Yes, I would want a real marriage, if you would. Isaac rose from his chair, still holding her hand, and drew her to her feet. Standing before her, he cupped her face gently with his free hand. Lucinda Morgan, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, not just on paper, but in truth? Lucinda's heart raced as she looked up into his earnest blue eyes. Yes, she whispered. I will. The kiss that followed was tender at first, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened into something more passionate. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, and the look they shared spoke of promises yet to be fulfilled. We'll ride to town tomorrow, Isaac said, his voice husky. Find the preacher and make this official before Wright has a chance to interfere. Lucinda nodded, a smile blooming on her face despite the danger that still loomed. For the first time since the river had nearly claimed her life, she felt truly hopeful about her future. The storm outside began to subside, as if nature itself approved of their decision. Dawn broke clear and golden after the night's storm. Isaac and Lucinda set out early for Medicine Bow, riding double on Thunderbolt. The journey would take most of the day, but Isaac had insisted they leave immediately, concerned that Gerald Wright might return with more men. As they rode, Isaac pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his early days in the territory. Lucinda found herself laughing more than she had in years, her arms wrapped comfortably around Isaac's waist as they traversed the rugged landscape. By mid-afternoon, the small town of Medicine Bow came into view, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a single dusty street. Isaac guided Thunderbolt to a hitching post outside the general store. "Wait here," he said, as he helped Lucinda down from the horse. "I'll find out where the preacher is, and we should get you a proper ring." Lucinda touched his arm before he could leave. "Isaac, are you certain about this? Once we do this, the Wrights will become your enemies too." Isaac covered her hand with his own. "I'm certain about you, Lucinda. The rest we'll handle together." As Isaac disappeared into the store, Lucinda remained by Thunderbolt, absently stroking the horse's neck as she took in the frontier town. Women in practical dresses hurried about their errands, while men in dusty work clothes lounged outside the saloon. It was a far cry from the refined streets of Boston, but Lucinda found she preferred the honest simplicity of this place. "Well, look what the cat dragged in." The familiar voice sent a chill down Lucinda's spine. She turned to find Howard Wright, Gerald's father, standing a few feet away. The older man's weathered face was set in hard lines, his gray eyes cold as they assessed her. "Mr. Wright," Lucinda acknowledged, forcing her voice to remain steady. "My son said he found you playing house with that Vance fellow," Howard said, taking a step closer. "I didn't believe it at first. A Boston lady like yourself, living in sin with a no-account rancher. But here you are." Lucinda lifted her chin defiantly. "What I do is no longer any concern of yours, Mr. Wright. Your son made it clear what he truly thought of me before he allowed me to fall into the river." "Our arrangement is over." Howard's laugh was without humor. "That's not how contracts work, my dear. Your father and I have an agreement, and Gerald is prepared to overlook your indiscretion in the interest of business." "There was no indiscretion," Lucinda said firmly. "Mr. Vance saved my life when your son nearly ended it, and I'm here today to marry him." Howard's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Well, you might find that more difficult than you imagine. The preacher in these parts knows who butters his bread, and it certainly isn't Isaac Vance." Before Lucinda could respond, Isaac emerged from the store, immediately tensing when he saw Howard Wright. He moved quickly to Lucinda's side, his posture protective. "Right," he acknowledged coldly. "Vance," Howard returned with equal frost. "I understand congratulations are in order. Though I must say I'm surprised a man of your limited means would think himself worthy of a Boston heiress." Isaac's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. "Lucinda's worth has nothing to do with her family's money, something your son failed to recognize. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have business with the preacher." Howard's smile was predatory. "By all means, though I should warn you, Reverend Mills is currently indisposed. Something about a sick parishioner out at the Carson place. Won't be back for days, I hear." Lucinda's heart sank. Howard Wright's influence was clearly at work, delaying the very protection she and Isaac sought. "Then we'll find a justice of the peace," Isaac said firmly. "Judge Parker is also away," Howard replied smoothly. "County business in Cheyenne, terrible timing, isn't it?" Isaac took Lucinda's hand, his grip reassuring. "We'll wait," Howard shrugged. "Of course, though I feel obligated to mention that my son and several of our ranch hands are due in town tomorrow. Gerald is quite determined to reclaim his bride. I'd hate to see things get unpleasant." The threat hung in the air like gunsmoke after a shot. "Your son nearly killed Lucinda," Isaac said, his voice dangerously quiet. "If he comes near her again, he'll answer to me." Howard's expression hardened. "Be careful, Vance. You're playing a game you can't win. The Wrights own half this territory." "But you don't own me," Lucinda interjected, finding her courage. "And no contract my father signed gives Gerald the right to force me into marriage." "We'll see about that," Howard said coldly before tipping his hat with mock courtesy. "Good day to you both." As Howard Wright strode away toward the saloon, Lucinda turned to Isaac, fear evident in her eyes. "What do we do now, if the preacher and judge are both conveniently absent?" Isaac squeezed her hand. "Then we find another way, come on." He led her to the general store, where the proprietor, a portly man with kind eyes, greeted them warmly. "Mr. Vance, good to see you. Been a while since you've come to town." "Mr. Henderson," Isaac nodded. "I need your help. This is Miss Lucinda Morgan. We're looking to get married, but it seems the Reverend and Judge are both unavailable." Henderson's expression grew concerned. Ah, yes, I heard about that. Convenient timing, some might say. He glanced meaningfully in the direction Howard Wright had gone. Is there anyone else who could perform a legal marriage? Lucinda asked. Henderson rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Well, there's old Jim Blackwood over in Buffalo. He's a circuit judge, not beholden to the Wrights or anyone else. Bit of a character, but his marriages are as legal as they come. Buffalo, Isaac repeated. That's a day's ride from here. At least, Henderson confirmed. But if you're determined, it might be your best option. I can sell you a simple ring, and my wife might have a dress that could be altered for the lady. Isaac looked at Lucinda questioningly. It would mean another day of hard riding. Are you up for that? Lucinda nodded without hesitation. I'd ride to Canada if necessary. The decision made, they quickly gathered what they needed: a simple gold band for Lucinda, provisions for the journey, and a blue calico dress that Mrs. Henderson hurriedly altered while they waited. You should leave town separately, Henderson advised as he wrapped their purchases. Wright's probably got eyes watching. Head north like you're returning to your ranch, then circle back east toward Buffalo once you're out of sight. Isaac thanked the man for his advice and generosity. As they prepared to depart, Henderson added one final warning. Be careful, you two. Howard Wright doesn't take kindly to being crossed, and his son's pride is smarting something fierce after what happened at the bridge. Outside, Isaac helped Lucinda mount Thunderbolt before swinging up behind her. They rode out of town at a casual pace, aware of the eyes that followed them from the saloon window where Howard Wright stood watching. Once they were beyond the town limits, Isaac urged Thunderbolt into a gallop, heading north as Henderson had suggested. They rode hard for an hour before veering east toward Buffalo, taking a little-used trail through dense pine forest. Night was falling when Isaac finally slowed their pace, conscious of Thunderbolt's labored breathing. We need to rest the horse, he explained, guiding them toward a small clearing beside a creek. And you must be exhausted. Lucinda was indeed sore from the long ride, but she shook her head. I'm fine. Shouldn't we keep going? Gerald could be following us. Not in the dark, Isaac assured her as he dismounted and helped her down. And Thunderbolt needs water and rest if he's going to carry us to Buffalo tomorrow. Isaac efficiently set up a small camp, building a fire and preparing a simple meal from their provisions. Lucinda marveled at his competence, the easy way he moved through tasks that would have confounded most men of her acquaintance in Boston. As they sat beside the fire, eating beans and hardtack, Lucinda found herself studying Isaac's profile, admiring the strong line of his jaw and the quiet determination in his eyes. She had agreed to marry him out of necessity, yes, but also because in the short time she had known him, she had glimpsed a man of rare quality. A man who lived by a code of honor that had nothing to do with social position or wealth. What are you thinking? Isaac asked, catching her gaze. Lucinda smiled softly. That I'm fortunate. Most women in my position would be forced to marry a man they despised. Instead, I'm running away to marry a man I've come to admire greatly. Isaac's expression softened. I'm the fortunate one, Lucinda. When Alina died, I thought that part of my life was over. I never expected to find someone who would make me want to try again. He reached across the small space between them to take her hand. I want you to know that this isn't just about protecting you from Wright. I meant what I said back at the cabin. I've grown to care for you deeply. Lucinda's heart quickened at his words. I care for you too, Isaac, more than I thought possible in such a short time. In the flickering firelight, their lips met in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened. Isaac's arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and Lucinda melted against him, reveling in the strength and tenderness she found there. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he promised. Tomorrow you'll be my wife, and no one will be able to take you away. They slept beneath the stars that night, wrapped in blankets side by side, their hands entwined between them. Despite the uncertain future, Lucinda felt a peace she hadn't known in years, perhaps ever. Dawn found them already on the move, riding toward Buffalo with renewed determination. The town, when they reached it by mid-afternoon, was smaller than Medicine Bow but seemed somehow more welcoming. There was none of the tension Lucinda had felt in the Wright-dominated settlement. Judge Jim Blackwood proved to be exactly as Henderson had described a character. The old man had a wild shock of white hair and bushy eyebrows that seemed to have a life of their own. His office was cluttered with books and papers, and he peered at them over half-moon spectacles with shrewd, intelligent eyes. "So you're the couple Henderson telegraphed about," he said, sizing them up. "Running from the Wrights, I hear." Isaac nodded, not bothering to deny it. Miss Morgan was betrothed to Gerald Wright against her wishes. When she refused to go through with the wedding, he struck her, and she ended up in the river. I pulled her out, and now they're trying to force her to honor the contract anyway. Blackwood's bushy eyebrows rose. "Is that true, young lady?" "Yes, sir," Lucinda confirmed. "My father arranged the match without my knowledge of Gerald's true character. Now I fear for my safety if I'm forced to return to him." The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "Well, I've never had much use for the Wrights, too high and mighty by half. If you two are sure about this marriage, I'm happy to perform the ceremony." Relief washed over Lucinda. "We're sure," she said, glancing at Isaac, who nodded in agreement. "Very well then," Blackwood said, rising from his desk. "Let's not waste time. The Wrights have long arms, and I wouldn't put it past them to try to stop this." The ceremony was simple but moving. In Judge Blackwood's cluttered office, with only his secretary and a local shopkeeper as witnesses, Lucinda and Isaac exchanged vows. When Isaac slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, Lucinda felt tears stinging her eyes, not of sadness or fear, but of hope and something that felt surprisingly like joy. "By the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Blackwood declared. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Vance." Isaac's kiss was gentle but full of promise, his hands cradling her face as if she were something precious. When they parted, Blackwood handed them the marriage certificate with a flourish. "This is legal and binding in all territories and states. Howard Wright can bluster all he wants, but you're Mrs. Vance now, young lady. No contract between your father and Wright can override that." As they stepped out of the judge's office into the late afternoon sunlight, Isaac took Lucinda's hand. "Well, Mrs. Vance," he said, testing the new name. "What shall we do now?" Lucinda squeezed his hand, a small smile playing at her lips. "Take me home, husband." They spent the night at Buffalo's small hotel, sharing a room as husband and wife for the first time. There was an initial awkwardness as they prepared for bed, both aware of the shift in their relationship from protector and protected to something far more intimate. Isaac, ever the gentleman, offered to sleep in the chair by the window, but Lucinda would have none of it. "We're married now," she said softly, taking his hand and drawing him toward the bed. "I don't want to begin our life together with you sleeping in a chair." Their first night together was a revelation for Lucinda. Isaac's tenderness, his concern for her comfort and pleasure, were unlike anything she had been taught to expect from the marriage bed. In his arms, she discovered a passion she hadn't known she possessed, and by morning, any lingering doubts about their hasty marriage had been thoroughly dispelled. They left Buffalo early, eager to return to the cabin that would now be their shared home. The journey was more leisurely than their frantic ride to Buffalo, both of them savoring these first days of marriage despite the shadow of the Wrights that still loomed over them. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Lucinda asked as they made camp on the second night of their return journey. Isaac added another log to the fire before answering. "Gerald might want to out of pride, but Howard's a businessman first. Now that we're legally married, forcing you to return would be kidnapping. Even the Wrights can't operate that far outside the law without consequences." "What about my father?" Lucinda wondered aloud. "When he learns I've married you instead of Gerald?" Isaac sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We'll write to him, explain everything that happened. If he truly cares for your happiness, he'll understand eventually." Lucinda leaned into his embrace, drawing comfort from his steadiness. "And if he doesn't?" "Then we'll build our life without his blessing," Isaac said simply. "It won't be the life you were raised to expect. I can't offer you mansions or fine clothes, but I promise you'll never lack for anything that truly matters." Lucinda turned in his arms to face him, her eyes shining in the firelight. "I've had wealth all my life, Isaac. What I never had until now was someone who valued me for myself, not for what I could bring to a business arrangement. I choose this life, our life, freely and gladly. Their return to the cabin was bittersweet. As they crested the final hill and the small structure came into view, Lucinda felt a surge of emotion. This humble place had become more of a home to her in a few short weeks than her father's grand Boston house had ever been. But as they drew closer, Isaac reined Thunderbolt to an abrupt halt. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice tight. Lucinda followed his gaze and gasped. The cabin door hung askew on its hinges and the chicken coop had been smashed. Even from a distance, they could see that the garden had been trampled. "Stay here," Isaac instructed, reaching for the rifle secured to the saddle. "No," Lucinda said firmly, "we face this together." After a moment's hesitation, Isaac nodded and they approached the cabin cautiously. Inside, destruction greeted them. What few possessions Isaac had owned had been broken or scattered. The mattress had been slashed, feathers from the stuffing drifting through the air like snow. On the table, held in place by a hunting knife driven deep into the wood, was a note. Isaac pulled the knife free and read the message aloud. "A wedding gift from the Wrights. This isn't over." Lucinda sank onto the only unbroken chair, surveying the destruction with a mixture of anger and despair. "They won't let us be, will they?" Isaac crumpled the note in his fist. "They're trying to scare us, make us run." "What do we do now?" Lucinda asked, looking up at her husband. Isaac's expression hardened with resolve. "We rebuild. This is our home, and I'll be damned if I let the Wrights drive us from it." Over the next several days, they worked side by side to restore the cabin. Isaac repaired the door and furniture while Lucinda salvaged what she could of their belongings. They rebuilt the chicken coop and replanted the garden, though it was late in the season for some crops. Word of their marriage spread quickly through the territory. Some folks, tired of the Wrights' dominance, quietly offered support. Mr. Henderson from the general store sent a wagon with supplies, a belated wedding gift, his note said. A neighboring rancher appeared one morning with 3 chickens to replace those that had been killed in the attack. A month after their return, as summer began to wane toward autumn, Lucinda received a letter from her father. She recognized his handwriting immediately and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The letter was brief, but not unkind. Her father expressed shock at Gerald Wright's treatment of her and relief that she had survived. While he was disappointed that she had married without his blessing, he acknowledged that the circumstances were extraordinary. He would not seek to invalidate her marriage, nor would he continue his business arrangement with the Wrights. "He's coming to visit," Lucinda said, looking up from the letter with wide eyes. "In the spring, he wants to meet you." Isaac, who had been repairing a harness at the table, raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Well, that's unexpected." "He says he's sending funds to help us establish ourselves properly," Lucinda continued, scanning the letter again. "And my mother's jewelry, which he had been saving for my wedding. Will you be happy here until then?" Isaac asked, setting aside his work to take her hands in his. "This life is so different from what you're accustomed to." Lucinda smiled, rising to wrap her arms around his neck. "I've never been happier, Isaac. Each day I learned something new about this land, about you, about myself. I wouldn't trade our life together for all the comforts of Boston." Isaac pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "I never thought I'd have this again," he murmured against her hair. "A home that feels alive, someone to share the days with." Autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, and with it came a new sense of security. The Wrights, perhaps deterred by the legal nature of the marriage and Lucinda's father's withdrawal from their business arrangement, made no further moves against them. Isaac and Lucinda settled into the rhythm of ranch life together. With her father's financial assistance, they were able to purchase additional cattle and hire 2 ranch hands to help with the expanded operation. The one-room cabin was enlarged to include a proper bedroom and a larger kitchen, where Lucinda experimented with recipes gleaned from Mrs. Henderson and other neighboring women. Winter brought its own challenges, blizzards that isolated them for days, the constant battle to keep livestock fed and watered, but also joys. Evenings spent by the fire, planning for the future. the simple pleasure of falling asleep in each other's arms and waking to find the world transformed by snow. It was during one such blizzard, as howling winds rattled the windows and snow piled high against the cabin walls, that Lucinda shared her news with Isaac. "I think we should add another room to the cabin in the spring," she said casually as they sat together on the bearskin rug before the fire. Isaac looked up from the book he'd been reading aloud. "Oh, what kind of room did you have in mind?" Lucinda took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "A nursery." Isaac's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Are you certain?" Lucinda nodded, her face glowing with happiness. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it when we were in town last week. The baby should arrive in early summer." Isaac's whoop of joy echoed through the cabin as he gathered her into his arms, his face alight with wonder and love. "A baby," he repeated, as if testing the reality of the word. "Our baby." "Are you pleased?" Lucinda asked, though his reaction had left little doubt. "Pleased doesn't begin to describe it," Isaac said, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. "Overwhelmed, terrified, ecstatic, I never thought I'd have the chance to be a father." That night, as they lay together in their bed listening to the storm rage outside, Isaac's hand rested protectively over Lucinda's abdomen. "I was so alone before you came into my life," he murmured. "Now look at us, a home, a ranch that's growing, a baby on the way. Sometimes I wonder if I dreamed you up." Lucinda turned to face him in the darkness. "If this is a dream, then we're sharing it, and I never want to wake up." Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers and the promise of new life. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts, Isaac's practical knowledge, and Lucinda's keen business sense she'd inherited from her father. Henry Morgan arrived in May, just as the mountains were shedding the last of their snow. Lucinda waited anxiously at the train station in Medicine Bow, her condition now visible beneath her practical but well-made dress. When her father descended from the train, she was struck by how much older he looked than when she'd left Boston barely a year before. His hair had more gray and lines of worry etched his face, but when he saw her, his expression transformed with relief and joy. "Lucinda," he breathed, embracing her carefully when he noticed her condition. "My dear girl, when I received word that you had fallen into the river, I thought I had lost you forever." "I nearly was lost," Lucinda acknowledged. "If not for Isaac." Henry turned to the tall cowboy who stood respectfully a few steps away. "Mr. Vance, it seems I owe you a debt I can never repay." Isaac stepped forward, extending his hand. "No debt, sir. Saving Lucinda was the best thing I ever did for both of us." Henry studied the young man who had married his daughter without permission, taking in the honest blue eyes and steady gaze. After a moment, he clasped Isaac's hand firmly. "I believe you mean that." The 2 weeks of Henry's visit were transformative for all of them. Lucinda watched with growing pleasure as her father came to appreciate Isaac's integrity and work ethic. For his part, Isaac found in Henry a keen mind and an unexpected ally in his plans to expand the ranch. "He's not what I expected," Isaac admitted to Lucinda one night after her father had retired to the new guest room they'd added in preparation for his visit. "From the way you described him arranging your marriage to Wright, I thought he'd be more rigid," Lucinda suggested. "He was in Boston. But I think nearly losing me changed something in him. And seeing this place, seeing us together, he understands now that happiness doesn't always follow the path he planned." Before Henry departed, he took Isaac aside for a private conversation. When they returned to the cabin, both men wore satisfied expressions. "What did my father want?" Lucinda asked later as they prepared for bed. Isaac smiled. "He offered to invest in the ranch as a silent partner. Said he's always wanted to be part of a Western venture, but never found the right opportunity until now." Lucinda raised an eyebrow. "And you agreed, with conditions?" Isaac nodded. "The ranch remains ours to run as we see fit. His investment gives us the capital to expand properly, but he has no say in day-to-day operations. It's a good arrangement for all of us." Lucinda laid a hand on her rounded belly, where their child had begun to make its presence known with increasingly vigorous movements. "He's trying to secure our future and his grandchild's. I can respect that," Isaac said, placing his hand beside hers to feel the baby's kicks. Family should look out for each other. As summer reached its peak, so did Lucinda's pregnancy. The heat was oppressive, making her uncomfortable and restless. Isaac did everything he could to ease her discomfort, from building a special rocking chair for the porch where she could catch the evening breeze to riding miles to find fresh strawberries when she mentioned craving them. Their son arrived on a star-filled July night, with Mrs. Henderson serving as midwife. After hours of labor that tested Lucinda's endurance to its limits, the first cry of their child filled the cabin, strong and indignant. "A boy, Mrs. Henderson announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant in Lucinda's arms. A fine, healthy son. Isaac, who had paced outside during the birth as was customary, was called in to meet his son. The look of awe on his face as he gazed down at the tiny bundle in Lucinda's arms brought fresh tears to her eyes. "He's perfect," Isaac whispered, gently touching the downy dark hair that already showed signs of his own curls. "Absolutely perfect." They named him James Henry Vance James for Isaac's father and Henry for Lucinda's. In the weeks that followed, they settled into the rhythm of life with a newborn. Nights were short, days were busy, but neither had ever known such contentment. One evening, as the first hint of autumn coolness touched the air, Isaac found Lucinda on the porch, nursing James as she rocked in the chair he had made her. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light, turning the distant mountains to flame. "I was thinking," Isaac said, leaning against the porch railing, "about the day I found you in the river." Lucinda looked up, her expression soft as she stroked James's cheek. "What about it? Do you remember what I said to you when I pulled you to shore?" Isaac asked. Lucinda smiled. "You said you'd keep me, and you have." Isaac knelt beside the rocking chair, his eyes filled with all the love he'd come to feel for this remarkable woman who had transformed his life. "Best promise I ever made," he said, leaning in to kiss her gently. "And one I intend to keep for the rest of our days." Above them, the first stars of evening appeared in the darkening sky, witnesses to a love that had begun in crisis, but had grown into something enduring and true. The river that had nearly claimed Lucinda's life had instead carried her to the one man who would value her for exactly who she was, not for her family's wealth or connections, but for her courage, her kindness, and her heart. As night fell completely over their small ranch, Lucinda looked at her husband and son, marveling at how close she had come to never knowing this happiness. The currents of fate had carried her not to death, but to life, a fuller, richer life than she had ever imagined possible. "I love you, Isaac Vance," she whispered. "And I love you, Lucinda Vance," he replied, the name still filling him with pride and wonder, until the mountains crumble and the rivers run dry. In the years that followed, their family grew. A daughter joined them 2 years after James Elizabeth Eleanor, with her mother's violet eyes and her father's determined spirit. 2 more sons completed their family, Thomas and Samuel, inseparable from birth and full of mischief. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship, expanding until the Vance brand was known throughout the territory for quality stock and fair dealing. The cabin grew into a proper ranch house, with a wide porch where the family gathered on summer evenings to watch the sunset. Howard and Gerald Wright eventually left the territory. Their influence diminished after a series of poor business decisions and the withdrawal of investors like Henry Morgan. The feud that had threatened to define Lucinda and Isaac's early marriage faded into a distant memory, a story they would someday tell their grandchildren about how their love had begun. Henry Morgan became a frequent visitor, delighting in his grandchildren and taking increasing pride in the ranch he had helped build. The Boston merchant and the Wyoming rancher formed an unlikely friendship based on mutual respect and shared love for Lucinda and the children. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Lucinda with a gift, a silver locket containing miniature portraits of their 4 children. Inside the lid, he had engraved 3 simple words, "I'll keep you." Lucinda wore it always, a tangible reminder of the promise that had saved her life in more ways than one. And each night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, She thanked whatever forces of fate had carried her into the arms of the man who had become her heart's true home. For Isaac and Lucinda Vance, the river that had nearly separated them forever had instead become the current that bound their lives together, a powerful, enduring flow of love that sustained them through all the seasons of their shared life on the Wyoming frontier.